Welcome to Latent Treasures, a uniquely uplifting podcast filled with inspiring guests to brighten your week. Our show takes inspiration from a lesser-known quote from C.S. Lewis. What we want is not more little books about Christianity, but more little books by Christians on other subjects, with their Christianity latent. While I love books, this is 2020. And let's face it, audio is a lot easier to produce. But you are more than welcome to think of our little podcast as a bunch of little books about various topics, lived by ordinary people. But these people are quite extraordinary in the way their faith drives them and fuels their journey. Journeys on which they're making profound impacts on everyone around them. We hope you'll be blessed by these stories and recognize that inside each of us is the ability to be similarly extraordinary. If you like our show, please subscribe. And if you find any individual show special, please like it and share it freely. Today's guest is Talitha Phillips, CEO of Claris Health. The organization, as their name suggests, works to give their patients and clients clarity regarding some critical health questions, ranging from nutritional health to sexual health. Their holistic approach walks with their clients through their entire journey and is a major reason why they're seeing so much success with those that they serve. Talitha is known as the heartbeat of Claris Health, and after 19 years of loyal leadership, it's not hard to understand why. Despite many highs and lows, she's led the organization through massive growth and has vastly expanded their reach. She studied organizational communication at Pepperdine and didn't expect to end up working with Claris Health. We think you'll discover that the way her path unfolded is quite inspiring and encouraging. It's a wonderful example of how God can use some of our darker or more challenging times in our lives to bless not only us, but many more people if we allow Him to use our scars for His purposes. Also, be sure to check out our full show notes to learn more about Talitha, Claris Health, and how you can connect with them or learn about their service model via their white paper. There you will also learn about our show's two artists, Mary Rogers and Cheyenne Summers. They provide our music and cover art respectively, and we know you'll enjoy more of their art linked in those show notes. But now, without further ado, please welcome Talitha Phillips. Today we have the honor of getting an opportunity to chat with Talitha Phillips of Claris Health, and very looking forward to hearing your whole story, because so much of it I'm not even aware of, but I know a lot of what you've been doing with Claris, and it's a phenomenal organization serving those in need in the Los Angeles area. And welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Claris Health in general, let's just kind of set a background for our listeners. Claris Health is an organization that began, probably 18? How long ago? 18 years ago? 19?
No. So technically they began about 44 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. But I've been with the organization for 19 years in May, and there have been a lot of changes in the past, couple of decades, but they are quite a bit older than that.
Yeah. Okay. So I knew they were around before you got involved, but I didn't know they were around that long before you got involved. I definitely want to hear about that. And now you are their CEO?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And tell us a little bit about it, again, background-wise, what Claris does for the community.
Yeah. So, originally, and maybe this is helpful to give a little bit of background. So Claris from the beginning has really worked with primarily pregnant women or women who think they might be pregnant. And initially it was providing, counseling and support services, largely for those who are making decisions about a pregnancy, and then supporting them, basic needs after a baby is born. And then over the last couple of decades, what we've discovered, and one of the things that's been a passion of mine, is just realizing that all of these decisions, they're sort of a before, during, and an after. And on the before side, there's this incredible opportunity on the prevention side and working with individuals and hoping that they don't ever, need services in this sort of moment of I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do. And so there's like that before care. There's also a lot of preventative healthcare services. And then there's the during, there's that moment of I might think I might be pregnant, or I might have an STD, or I know that I'm pregnant and I don't have insurance and I need help. So there's that. And there's the after. So regardless of what decision a woman makes or a couple makes, they need support and care afterwards. And so the word Claris means clarity. And that's really what we're all about, is we're bringing clarity to what can often feel like confusing situations. And then, offering that clarity and that care before, during, and after. And specifically on the after, just looking at regardless of the choice that she makes, they all will change her life in a way. And so just being willing to hold somebody's hand through that, and not just for a moment, but really in the months and the years that follow that decision.
Yeah, that's a really amazing thing, and overlooked. And I think just as an outsider looking in, I think there's a tendency to kind of put different objectives and or people's philosophies in a box one way or another, really. But that's not how life really works, right? Like you said, and I can only imagine the stories that have come, that you've experienced, that are people's own philosophies changing as they gain clarity, one way or the other, right? In either direction. And it's amazing to see that there's an organization that can come beside a person and walk with them through a lot of that. So what were your original, I believe you got exposure to them while you were still in college, is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. So I have sort of a unique journey of how I got to Claris. And what I forgot to say is along the years of the progression, we went from this counseling to then becoming a licensed medical clinic. So now we actually offer medical services. So everything from health screenings to also just prenatal care and other, medical services. So I wanted to add that. But
Yeah, because you're a much larger or wider reach than just the pre or during or post pregnancy types of care.
Yeah, and I think one of the, to hit on the point that you said, is when you're in relationship with people and when your model is very relational and comprehensive, you realize that there are these unique stories, but there's also these very unique needs. And so to build this sort of one size fits all model just doesn't work. And so I think what we realized is, we had a clinic on the west side of Los Angeles, and then we opened a clinic in South LA, and we realized while the services are the same, how you offer those services often changes because the needs in the community are different. And then we launched a mobile clinic, and we started going into all these other, vulnerable communities in the city, and realized, oh my gosh, the needs are so much bigger than we ever even realized. And so that has sort of helped broaden the services without losing that target. It's sort of like, yes, we still care for this target population, but then there's all these, we can't forget that, our city has an incredibly large population of people experiencing homelessness, and the foster care industry and human trafficking. And those are all really important things that intersect the work that we do. And so to say, well, we only focus on this, isn't serving our community well. So that has broadened us. But my
Yeah.
story, how I found out about it, I was a Pepperdine student. I was 19. I grew up in a very Christian home. My parents were actually missionaries. The oldest daughter, actually only daughter, oldest child, and I came to Pepperdine on a scholarship. And the summer after my freshman year, I went home to Oklahoma where my family is, and I found out that I was pregnant. And, they always, say like, like, how did this happen and why me? And I mean, it's true. You really do. I mean, I know that sounds like so bad, but you do. And I just, the walls of my world just came crashing down, and just feeling like just panicked and trapped and alone. And my boyfriend at the time, we like barely talked to anyone. And it was just this, I was getting ready to do a semester overseas, and just out of panic made this decision of, we need to make this go away. And I remember thinking, I know better. I don't want to do this. Like, if you had asked me, what do I want to do? I would never have chosen that. But it was like, I'm going to make this decision. Terrified to go to my parents and admit, terrified to go to the church. And then in the process of making that decision, I remember saying, we'll do this, and then I will spend the rest of my life hating myself. And like, such a conscious decision. I remember in the back of my mind thinking, I know this is so hard to admit, but I remember thinking, I know God's going to try to forgive me, and I will just reject that because I know what I'm doing. And so imagine, going through that. And then I spent a good couple years trying to destroy my life and make myself, punish myself for that decision. It was interesting. My boyfriend at the time resorted to drugs and alcohol and other sort of numbing, coping mechanisms. And I was like, well, I did this so I could graduate. So I need to graduate the top of my class. And I need to try to make sense of all of this. I became, it's very compulsive behaviors, and our relationship became incredibly abusive. But I stayed because I really felt like that was my worth. And my senior year at Pepperdine, I heard about this little counseling center, and that they offered this, pregnancy loss support group. And, it took forever to gain the courage to call. And I remember calling, and just immediately this woman, her name was Debbie. And it was just like everything in the world stopped, and I was the only thing that mattered. And she just listened, and she said, you're not alone. And just hearing those words, I think in my head, I was the only girl at Pepperdine that had been through this. I was the only Christian girl that had done this. And so I had just put myself in this box. And then finally got the courage to go. She invited me to show up, and I remember sitting in a room and thinking, oh my gosh, there's other people here, which was so powerful to look somebody else in the eye. And we all had very unique stories. But for the next 10 weeks, we journeyed together through this. And it was, like peeling the first layer of an onion.
Yeah.
Didn't get to the core, but gosh, it changed my life in a lot of ways. And I, finished the group and thought, this is great. And thank you so much. And I loved it. And then I thought I'd go on with my life, and I graduated college. And the director at the time had just had her second baby, and she was leaving the organization. So for about almost a year, they didn't have anyone in the role. And I kept running into these women, and they kept saying, for some crazy reason, they were like, we really feel like you're supposed to be the new director. And it's like, there's no way. I went to Pepperdine. I have loans, and my dad wants me to be a lawyer, and all these things. And so I ran from this position for many, many, many months. And then the craziest story, I got a call from Chuck Norris's family, the actor, and he and his wife were having twins, and they wanted a night nurse to help with the twins after they were born. And I knew the family, loosely knew the family from my ex-boyfriend. And they said, you should call Talitha. She has an incredible experience, and she's so good at getting babies to sleep. And then it's somebody that you can trust. And so the only way I could work that many nights was if I took a part-time day job, which Claris was this part-time day job. So, and before, to back up, when this woman, Susan, I saw her somewhere, and she said, I really think you should be the director. Have you prayed about this? And it was that moment, if you've ever had this conviction, where I was like, of course I haven't prayed about this. I don't need to pray about this. I know that I'm not supposed to work there. And she said something to the effect of, maybe you should just try praying about it.
Yeah.
And I did, but it was more of the prayer of, fine, if you really want me to work at that place, you need to make it abundantly clear. And that's exactly what happened. And so I came kicking and screaming. It was a surrendering process. The organization was so small. I think our budget at the time was like 90,000, and they were about to close their doors. Always, like, we didn't know if we would have enough funding to stay open. And so it's pretty incredible to fast forward, that was 19 years ago, and to see where we are now. It's pretty
Wow. Well,
incredible.
one, thank you for sharing that. I know it probably never super comfortable, to share the whole story over again. A few things stood out, though. Obviously, I could never be in your shoes. But it reminded me of how many people I know, and this includes myself, that had made some certain decisions in their relationships that may have put ourselves in a same position where now we're faced with this different outcome potentially. If the woman had gotten pregnant, what do you do, right? And the first thought is how important it is for none of us to ever jump to conclusions, right? Because if you've never been in those shoes, you have no idea how it might feel to be in those shoes. And as you were talking about, all your kind of self-targeting that you did as inner penance or whatever, right? Like here's my punishment for how I feel or the decision I feel I need to make. I hope people can stop and pause and digest that, because I don't know that we often do enough pause and reflect and put ourselves as best as we can in that decision shoe and try and have a deeper understanding. So I'm curious, as you went through that 10 weeks or 10 months?
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
Yeah.
It sounds like you found the people there that could pour into that, whether it was their own experience or somebody very, very close to them, that they had truly felt and digested that emotion. Or was it only because? Tell me about that, because I don't know. I don't want to assume anything. Was it the people who had the same experience that were part of the group, or was it the leadership that walked you through it all, or was it the combination?
I think it was a combination of the people, because for the first time I heard people say things that I thought I was the only one in the world. I was the only one that thought those things or that felt that way. And so then you suddenly realize I'm not the only one that felt that way. And I mean, an example would be, I was like, I'll never have children. Like, that was my one chance. I'm sure I'll never be able to have a baby. And then to hear somebody else say, I struggle with that. Or I hated my birthday. I discovered this. And so I've gone through the group several other times, but I remember saying, I hate my birthday. And somebody in the group was like, why do you hate your birthday? Have you always hated your birthday? Well, no, I haven't always hated my birthday. Well, when did you first hate your birthday? Oh, I had the abortion 5 days before my birthday. And so to connect those dots, to say, oh, I would have never on my own realized. I just thought, well, I hate my birthday and I never want to celebrate. Well, now I realized, I connected those dots. The other thing that was very helpful is that the group walks through the grief cycle. And so each week we would look into a different aspect of the grief cycle. And realizing that a lot of women and a lot of men who experience anything traumatic in life, you go through the cycle, and it's, it can be denial, relief, denial, anger, depression, acceptance, forgiveness, and healing. And so unpacking a lot of that and realizing, did I find relief? Did I in any way go into denial? Depression. I remember this chapter on depression, and one of the things that said the definition of depression is eyes turned inward, and how powerful that was, that, all the focus, suddenly there isn't a world around us, right? It goes inward. And how do you so that it's practical tools. And then part of the group was a Bible study. So it's also looking at what does the Bible say about these things? And there's so much hope in this. And so I think all of that, and the leadership was great, but it was more of a facilitation, which was nice. So it's you processing and them guiding, and all of that was, you get to the end, and it's this, acceptance. And how do we talk about it's like when I lead the group now, I always say there's not a start and an end. It's like a circle. So the next time you feel depressed, you may not get stuck there, because now you have some tools, but you don't arrive at acceptance and then you never think about this again. You kind of, it's a cycle. But it's a hopeful cycle, not, we want to get to where it's a scar. I'll always have a scar from that experience. Like but it's not a gashing, gaping, bleeding wound.
Yeah.
Just my battle wounds of this is where I've been. And it's not the only scar I carry, but it's a big one.
Yeah. So now I know you're a trained doula. Was that what, I don't think they have doula at Pepperdine. What did you go to college for? You said you were thought about law school. Was that what you went to Pepperdine for?
No, I went to school for organizational communication was my major, and wanted to go into consulting, like business consulting or communication consulting. So I do use, it's interesting because management is a part of OrCom. And so I do use some of that now, but this was not my goal. And telling my story was not my goal, like this becoming my passion and platform was not where I thought I was headed. But I think that's what's so great about the whole journey that we have in life, is that God often takes the thing that you want to bury and then says, actually, no, that's going to be the thing that I call you to expose. And other people may need to know that, because it's shame that keeps us quiet. It really is shame and fear.
And what a testament to how that 10-week experience impacted you, right? I mean, so much so that you could see yourself pursuing being that help to other people. Like, even though you ran from it for months and months and months because you had, Pepperdine loans to repay. But, I mean, that definitely says a lot about how impactful that experience was to be part of your healing journey, for you to see the value, and like you said, for God to use that in a way that you're uniquely, positioned to be effective for other people in that same, letting that passion kind of build, even though that, like you said, it was such a scar. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm just processing the whole, trying to put, what that would be like. So it was months and months after they had started pursuing you. And so when you had started doing the night nanny, night nurse, that you decided to do both?
Yeah. So I kind of all at the same time, I left the company I was at, took the job at what is now Claris. I started working for the Norrises as a night nurse, and I trained to become a labor doula at the time. So I kind of did it all at once. And then I still to this day do a lot of the doula stuff. So I've kind of always done both. And I mean, it is interesting how my world it all sort of fits together. I mean, at the time it was like, oh, I do this at night and then I do this during the day. And then you quickly realize, like, oh my gosh, so many of our clients and patients end up needing childbirth classes and doula support. And so it's become, a really sweet thing to sort of have that passion. And I think having the personal story, I mean, I would have never thought of this when I started working here, but it helped because when I walked into Claris, I mean, I remember on my first day looking around and thinking, I probably would never have walked in here when I was pregnant. Like, I wouldn't have maybe felt super safe here, or like, do we have the right things to offer people in that, And so, I was this 23-year-old kid. I mean, I really had no idea what I was doing. They handed me the keys And I remember thinking, like, I think I cried on my first day and thought, what have I done? But the good thing about it is I was so naive and young that I was just a sponge. And so I remember soaking everything in and then thinking, I don't know if that would work in LA. Let's maybe try this, or let's try that. Or we quickly moved facilities, and we were able to sort of build an organization. And then we quickly realized, gosh, this really isn't just a women's issue. And so we want their partners to come with them and feel safe enough to walk in and not see, all, I don't know, stencils on the wall or whatever, right? Like there should be a Sports Illustrated or something for guys to, do in the waiting room. And this is the old days when there were stencils. So, it was kind of a cool thing how the model was really birthed out of us looking at our audience and saying, what do you need? Like, how can we help you? And letting them really drive the services that we offer and the community partnerships and connections. And so I think that's been one of the sweetest things, is that we've always had this model of, listening to the feedback from those who access the services, and then really helping them process, because they have to live their life. We're not raising their children. We're not adopting their children. We're not, sitting at abortion clinics if they choose that. And so it's like when they leave the doors, they need to feel empowered and equipped, and then we'll hold their hand, but they still have to live their life. And so it's like, how can we help you without, living your life for you?
Yeah. So for those, including partially myself, because my vision is probably this narrow, what exactly are doula services? What's the range of what that does?
Yes. So a doula, there's a labor doula, and then there's like a postpartum doula. I'm actually trained as both, but most doulas are typically one or the other. So a labor doula is you help a family. It usually includes like some childbirth education. You get to know each other when she's pregnant, and then you go through the whole delivery with them. So you're just an advocate. You're not a medical person. You're there to help with relaxation techniques and just helping her get through the labor. And then, afterwards, like basic feeding and basic baby things. And then the postpartum doulas come in after the baby's born and help with caring for the baby. Or my specialty has always been sleep, like sleep training and helping getting babies on, a good schedule. And, but other doulas, postpartum doulas are, their specialty might be feeding or just caring for the mom and the baby.
I can count hundreds of families who missed your specialty, who never taught their children how to sleep right, who might be 7 years old now and still have the horrible sleep habits. Boy, that's people.
I hear that a lot.
If you're struggling with your child and they're not on a regular sleep pattern, please look into a postpartum sleep doula. Wow. I would have been recommending that a long time ago had I known that existed. I know so many people in that boat. Like, what are you doing to your kid? Wow. Okay. Sorry, that was partly informational just for myself, but that's helpful to know. And I'm sure there's other listeners who hopefully had the same question. I'm not the only idiot in the room. But where was I going to go with that? And was that inspired primarily because the nurses wanted you to or encouraged you to, or is that was something you just thought I'd like to know?
No, I had a friend who ended up working. So we met actually in the support group at Claris, which I totally forgot about this, but I met this girl in the group, and she was married and ended up getting pregnant, I think right after the group, and asked if I would go with her when she had the baby, just as support. She was like, I think, you're calming. A lot of people have been like, your voice is calming, and would you be there? So I went with her to St. John's Hospital, and she had the baby, and a nurse at the hospital in the middle of the delivery, it was a very difficult delivery. A nurse said, you should be a doula. And I was like you, I had never heard of it. I was like, what is a doula? She said, oh, you'd be really good at it. You help women get through labor. And so I went home and Googled it. And sure enough, I was like, oh, sure, I'll go to the training. It's like 3 days. And, so I trained in 2001, not really knowing what it was, but curious enough, and here we are.
Oh, that's really cool. I love hearing, just I think oftentimes the world gives us this script of here's how you run your life, right? You work hard in school and study and you discover something you're interested in and you pursue it and you go to college and you pursue it. And it's this, nice straight line approach to our goals. And to hear so many people, and I love sharing it on podcasts, to hear that this was never on my radar. It wasn't anything intentional, right? Life diverted. There was detours all over the place, or, how that even came to be, right? Had nothing to do with the 10 weeks, had nothing to do with the Norrises. It was something entirely separate. But again, God fit that puzzle piece in, and what a perfect fit.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you switched locations, and you started to quickly realize that to cater your services or design the organization around what you were seeing out of the people coming through the door was the best way to go. How long did that take to start to transition? How many people were on the team at that time? It sounds like you were small enough to pivot pretty quickly. Was there any resistance to it? Any of this, that's not how we've done it for the last 23 years?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was really blessed to have had a board at the time that was really encouraging and trusting of me. I mean, we had a real good relationship. When I started, it was two of us on staff part-time. And, pretty quickly, I think within a year, when we started pursuing the medical license and moved, we grew to maybe 4 or 5. Even today, we have, technically 3 different physical buildings and a mobile clinic, and we still only have about 18 people on staff. So we're big, but we're still used to, kind of running a smaller ship and, doing a lot of people wearing a lot of hats. But there was resistance at times. I mean, I think everything was sort of slow and incremental. When we opened our first satellite clinic, we really felt like we needed to go into a community where there was a lot of need, but that we shouldn't be driving it, that we needed to partner with somebody that had a heart for that community. And it led us to an area called the Crenshaw District. And largely because we were in relationship with this incredible woman who had a heart for the community, and she knew the need in the community. And then we went from there, we moved it to Inglewood because there was a hospital that really wanted to expand some of their services to what we offered. So we moved there. And then we just this week moved to the community of Linwood, which is between sort of by Compton and Watts, in an area that LA has identified as having incredible need. And it's a lot of the need in the women we see. Like, I think it's 23% of women don't receive prenatal care in their first trimester. And infant and maternal mortality rates are incredibly high in that community, and STD rates. And so it's looking at, okay, where is the need and how can we address that? And not doing it on our own, but we now have about 230 community partners that we work with. So if somebody comes in and they need housing, we connect them to somebody. But it's not a here's your sheet of referrals. It's a warm, my friend so-and-so runs this and we're going to give them a call for you. Or we think somebody in our lobby is likely in a trafficking situation. And so we're going to call our contact here, and we had a case where the person didn't speak English. And so we got information sent over in another language that we could have her read. And sure enough, we intercepted a potentially very dangerous situation. So realizing, like, none of us are called to do it all.
Yeah.
We need to do it in partnership with each other. And so that, very much, I think, was built into the fabric of us saying, we don't really know everything we're doing. We just know that we're supposed to be doing something, and then sort of following that trail.
Yeah. The net always goes far wider than we ever envisioned early on, especially. Tell me about how you guys interact, whether it be with other community partners and or like you said, there's a hospital there, even though it might be a private hospital, but the public versus private, not versus, but the public and private intermingling and interaction with each other, how you guys interact with the county or the Department of Health. Um, I'm completely clueless on how those interact on a healthcare service level because obviously there's so many layers to it. How does that get coordinated?
Yeah, so that's a big question. So let me try to unpack. So we're a licensed community care clinic. So we actually have our license from the state. So the health department, in a sense, gives us the license to operate. We have an OBGYN that sort of oversees all of our facilities. But the intersection, it's interesting. A clinic like ours could never really interact with anyone else if they chose not to. But for us, I think we've realized, especially in a city like Los Angeles, where there's high need and there's also just a difficulty navigating what you need to get the services you need. So for example, if somebody finds out they're pregnant and then chooses to parent and then needs to seek care, it's incredibly difficult in Los Angeles, depending on what your situation is. So if you are on Medi-Cal, it can be incredibly difficult because you might live in downtown LA and then they assign you a primary care, person for your pregnancy in Long Beach. Or if you don't have insurance, there's programs you can sign up for, but it's difficult navigating those. And so it's almost the advocacy part is so important. And there's some things we can advocate for, there's others that we can't. And so having a partnership, so our partners are, some of them are private like us, some of them are government partners, a lot of social service agencies and realizing, you need food and here's somebody that can help or um, specialty services. But it's interesting. So right now in the midst of this COVID season, there's it's become even more important, the difference or the ability of just seeing the difference between public and private. And so a lot of the government agencies have had to shut down and they've been sort of forced to close their doors or to pivot and not offer direct services. And we haven't had to do that. Our funding also isn't dependent upon the government. We're entirely privately funded. So we're able to do things often quicker than another organization because we're small and we're privately funded. One example, I love how you asked with the county. So we are on several county committees for infant and maternal mortality. I'm on a doula committee that is for specifically the African American community, who's the hardest. I mean, the health disparities in the African American community are I'm sure you've heard, just incredibly tragic numbers of infant and maternal mortality. Well, one of the things that they've proven to help with those numbers and better birth outcomes is something called group-based prenatal care. So it's prenatal care that you receive in a group. So instead of like you walking in and you get, 6 minutes with your doctor, you're in a group setting. So there's peer learning. The sessions with the provider, which usually it's a certified nurse midwife, they're about an hour to an hour and a half. So you're getting education, you're getting community, you're getting relationship, you're getting peer learning, and you're getting medical care. And you're being taught things, to take your own blood pressure and things to look out for. So we knew that that was an answer to this. And there were a lot of people that realized that, but we were able to get that up and running really quickly versus several other organizations that are dependent upon government funding. It's just it's taking much longer.
Yeah.
So that's been one of the benefits, but so they're now referring to us and we're referring. So if somebody's high risk and we have to transfer them out of our program, we can send them to one of these other well-established organizations. And so that's an example of we just have to work together and to do that. But there's some benefits to being smaller and private.
Yeah. And I'm assuming there's probably some hybrid groups where they're partly privately funded and partly some of their revenue comes from government programs.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Talk about the 19 years. I guess to start from a high level, maybe of how it's matured, how you decided to go from a staff of, and the board helped obviously, a staff of 2 part-time people, and as your donor base grew and your revenue grew, how you could expand services. And were there ever times where you forced an expansion because you just knew that the need that you were seeing was so massive that you just had to push for it and kept fighting for it, or is it generally organic? Paint that picture a little bit.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Um, so I'm definitely like a go-getter. I like challenges. Um, but I'm not a fundraiser per se. So I hate that part of my job. It's the most uncomfortable. But what I love to do is tell stories and build relationships. And so there was a really amazing part of the life cycle of Claris, where we were able to get a lot of training from an organization called Mission Increase Foundation. And their whole goal was what's called transformational fundraising versus transactional. So instead of the auctions where it's like, here's my money, I'll give you my money, now give me my item. It's this, you being involved with Claris should help transform you as well. And so Claris becomes more of the stage, not the microphone, telling you what you should do. And I found so much comfort in that. And it changed how we do our fundraising events. Our model for our gala changed. And I can't really take credit for it, except to say that it really, like, I just had a lot of peace when I heard that, and that's something I can do and be involved in. The whole 50 people are going to be on the street if you don't give us money. That never worked. First of all, it doesn't work for me because people would be like, okay, bye. But also, that scarcity mentality, I don't think is biblical. I
No.
don't
Yeah.
think it's good. And so I would rather tell you the story. And then if God moves on your heart to give, then great. And if he doesn't, then I have to trust him that there will be somebody else. So that was an incredible shift. And the more we told the story, the more people said, wait, I agree. And I think too, a beautiful thing in that is that regardless of how you view issues, there's so much common ground that we all have. And I think a lot of times people are like, no, what box are you in? And we just sort of have refused to let people put us in a box, because the people we serve aren't in a box and they're not all the same. And so if we can just focus on sharing their stories and what's happening in their life and helping our donors realize, like, we're there for one snippet of somebody's life. And it's an important season, but it's not their whole life. And so to label somebody or to sort of predict the future of their life is also not healthy. And so telling these honest and accurate stories without a bow being tied on every single one of them helps people realize, and also helps you see yourself in their stories. I mean, so many times, like our last gala, we share stories of men and stories of, all these different stories. And some of them are tragic and some of them are victorious, and they're all important. And so, but to answer your question, was there ever a time where I pushed something or we forced something? Yes. When we were first moving into South LA, we knew the Crenshaw district. We defined the area. We were like, that's where we need to go. And then I hired this woman and, brought her on. And then we had a board meeting and the board said, we don't have the money to do this. We just haven't raised any money. And the weight of, I already promised this person a job and we know we're supposed to go there, I just couldn't handle it. And I just remember saying, oh no, we will be going there. I will have to find a way to make this work. And the most uncomfortable thing, I had to get on the phone and I called people and just said, hey, we really want to do this. And we're $50,000 short. And I don't even remember how it all came together, but somehow the money came together and we were able to move forward. And I didn't ever regret it. I mean, I really do think it probably was a purposeful getting out of your comfort zone. And there have been other times where we've had to make really hard decisions. I mean, I don't know, we're in a tough season right now of what's
Yeah.
going to happen in the aftermath of this pandemic. And I would hate for anything to change, but I also know that we're doing a lot of incredible things during this season and pivoting in some ways, but it feels like these purposeful pivots because of the need in the city.
Yeah, man. There's like 85 branches I want to jump off to at once. So this is really hard. I might have to have you come back another time because I know I could keep you for 4 hours, and I won't do that. But you were just recently in another article that I had the joy of reading. But one of the things you mentioned in the article, I think was it Authority magazine or something like that?
There was one. Yeah.
You mentioned, and I just want to touch on this because, again, I like seeing that whole story, and not everything is always moving forward. Sometimes there's setbacks, and there's times you have to pivot and maybe even back down a little bit, and then, kind of like playing soccer. Sometimes you have to pass the ball backwards to be able to, advance forward some more. There were a couple times, or there was a comment you made in the article about there were times that you just wanted to quit. Not that you have to pick any particular one of those experiences, but I think that's an important part of your journey that people should understand as well, right? Like, what types of events caused that? Was it, that the Crenshaw experience of trying to build that out? Was it, what causes that and what gets you through it?
Yeah. I mean, I think there have been seasons that have been really hard internally and externally. So internally, there have been seasons where we've had a lot of turnover, or funding has been hard, or we've had a lot of really, tough client cases. I mean, we've had families where one of their kids passed away, and we've planned funerals, and we've had seasons where somebody is on multiple pregnancies, or they've lost their kids into foster care. I've been a part of these seasons where after you just feel like it's overwhelming, or this is just a drop in the Grand Canyon, right? Like, we're just one tiny drop, and can I keep doing this for one drop in the Grand Canyon? And then there's been external times where we've, been attacked by people in the community, or, others have, these articles have come out that are just full of, lies about you, or you just feel like, gosh, we don't fit here and we don't fit here. And then as the leader, they say it's lonely at the top, and it really is lonely. It can be lonely. There's times that you as a leader go down for something that really wasn't necessarily your fault, but you're the face of the organization. And so I think there's just seasons of whether it's burnout or exhaustion, or just sadness, for things, or just even personally going through things. There's been seasons where my family has gone through really hard things, but I still have to get up and lead an organization every day. And I have this sort of prayer at the beginning of every year. And my prayer has always been, God, please don't let me stay one day too long. Because I have met people on my journey who I feel like your season may have been up a little while ago, and and then you get to the point where it's like you retire, but you retire bitter, or you retire too tired. And I've always just prayed that. So every January, well, actually it's usually every October, because that's when our gala is. So I wake up the morning after the gala and I'm like, was that the last one I had to plan? And then, every year, like, am I done? But I will say, as hard as those times are, there are also those life-giving times of the client that walks in and says, did you know that because of this, I'm here? Or the client who you've worked with for 5, 6, 7 years, and then there's a breakthrough. Or, in those moments, like, you can't replace that. And the
Yeah.
fact that I go to work every day and know that the people that I'm managing and that I'm working with and that I'm serving with are making such a difference in this world. Like that, I can't imagine working anywhere else. and just love that aspect so much. So it is this balance. And I don't know, I never would have imagined that I'd still be here. But I am. I am.
And you're accomplishing all this with a full like family life as well, right? Tell us a little bit about that background.
Yeah. So I have two kiddos. I have a biological daughter that's 12, and then an adopted a daughter that was adopted, and she's 8. So it's, I mean, I didn't even realize this until one day somebody said to me, you've come full circle. Like, you've basically experienced every possible choice you've been a part of. And it is so interesting. And as a doula, I had been a doula for several adoption situations where I was there with the birth mom, and I remember that moment of when she would hand the baby over to the adoptive family, and I was like, "You can't do this. Like, you can't give them this baby." And and just grieving with birth moms, and then to be on the other side of that, and to be the one that put a baby in my car while the birth mom sat in a wheelchair and drove away with her baby, and just to sides of that, and understanding that adoption is just another form. There's so much loss and grief. And I think sometimes, especially I would say in the Christian community, they paint adoption as like the best and the most sacrificial of the options, and forget that that is at the expense of a loss to an individual. And so our adoption is very open. We see our birth mom a lot. She lives in Orange County, and it's been neat, and it's also been interesting to see other people have to sort of follow along that journey, and how uncomfortable, and it raises these great questions.
Yeah,
So we had like
dialogue.
really, really sweet opportunities. So yeah, so that's a little bit about our life right now, and yeah, very full, very
Yeah, for
busy.
sure. Goodness
Also
gracious. That's
homeschool, COVID school, whatever. I think you said that earlier. Like, we're also in COVID school, so we're all teachers as well, and
yeah,
pastors, and whatever else we're doing right
as if
now.
life isn't hard enough, right? Um, Last fall, you guys launched your mobile unit, and tell us a little bit about what drove that. What were the things that you were seeing that particularly made that something that was you knew was going to fit the need, and how's that been going?
The mobile is such a good example of just sort of how Claris sees the need and then is willing to address it. And that it actually started from a board member of a housing project in South LA asked if we would be willing to go in and do health screenings. It was a community that has a lot of mistrust of the medical community, transportation issues, and he had been trying to get some different medical organizations to go in, but they were too afraid to send people into the community. And somebody actually said to them, "Oh, you should call Claris." They're not afraid, they do anything. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But we actually, looked at it and really prayed about it. Sorry.
That's all good.
And in the process of that, our medical team said yes, like, we're willing to go. And so we started just going in and doing health screenings, and we would set up a little table and behind a screen, and it was just this very makeshift thing. And then quickly discovered, oh my gosh, there's so much need, and we could do so much more in this community. And so somebody years ago, everyone started launching these mobile clinics, and I remember thinking, there's no way, I'm never doing that, and there's really no need. So we did a feasibility study years ago, and proved there's really no need for this. And then when this happened, and these housing projects said, can you come and can you do more services, and the health department said, you can't do anything more without being in an actual clinic. We redid the feasibility study, and we had 42 locations that said, if you got a mobile clinic, we would want your services. And so that was in, I think, 2018. And we announced in 2018 that we were going to move forward. And by 2019, a year later, we had raised the money, built the mobile, and started launching the services. And we did it in a way that addresses more than just the pregnancy services that we have. So we do these general health screenings, STD testing, pregnancy services, early prenatal care. And then the greatest thing about the mobile is that the case management that can happen. So people are afraid to go to the doctor, but they'll go into a mobile clinic. And then we're able to transfer them and bring them to a clinic that can offer ongoing care. So that's been really great. And
And
then
does that help nurture the trust for those people who were were unwilling to walk into a brick and mortar clinic? Does having the experience with you as the introduction to a referral help a lot?
Definitely. I mean, it takes a lot of coaching from our team. Often it's because somebody comes to us. Hold on. Sorry. Dog got a ball and started playing ball. The I don't know if you could edit that out, but sorry about it's real life.
Gotta stay. This is real.
Forgot about the dog. The dog's still here. So a lot of times it's because somebody will come to us and we'll test, say they have really, really high blood pressure, and our team is able to sort of present to them, this is why you really need to go to the hospital or you really need to be seen. And so they would never have just gone to the hospital, but because we're able to convince them or offer to help with transportation or whatever it is, they're willing to do that. So that's been really great. And the casework has been amazing. A lot of times, if somebody is experiencing homelessness and they come to us and we're able to help them find, housing through that, or we've had a lot of people that are living in children. And so being able to do that, or we transfer them to our clinics. So if somebody comes to us and she finds out she's pregnant, we're able to immediately get her into one of our clinics for ongoing care and parenting classes or whatever it is that she needs, diapers, wipes. And then during COVID, so this mobile clinic is this 30-foot vehicle, and it was so neat because we were able to build it to exactly what we needed. And it has a reception, like a waiting area, counseling room, lab, and exam room. And when the pandemic hit, and at first we were like, we need to push pause on medical services until we can figure out how to handle that. We were able to immediately we discovered there's massive needs in the community for food and diapers and wipes and all those things that we take for granted or could take for granted. But we have this 30-foot unit that can go anywhere. And so we were like, we'll just become a food distribution vehicle and we'll just get diapers and wipes. And so it's been incredible. We've just been going into all these neighborhoods in the city and we pack it full of these foods, and we partner with an organization that's getting fresh produce from the USDA. And then we're getting, partnering with another Baby to Baby, that gives us diapers and wipes and formula and all these things, and we can take it in. So it's had this purpose that we never even knew we would need. And the timing is so incredible too, because in October we launched it, started doing medical services, and then come March, we'd have never known that we needed this and couldn't have done it without that mobile, really. And the mobile is this bright, beautiful vehicle that everyone sees. So we pull in and they know, oh, they're here, they're here for us. So it's been really neat.
That's tremendous. You touched a little bit. I don't know if there's a whole lot more to describe, but your core services around, pregnancy, but like you said, you also help even after the fact, or stay with and kind of continue to walk with those who need you to. But you also are involved in the health services or screening needs of, like you said, the man in the relationship or the siblings of those families. Can you go a little bit deeper into those kind of ancillary services?
Yeah, so our general health screenings are open to anyone. So it's, blood pressure, nutrition counseling, all of just the typical things that you would walk in for a physical. We can do blood work if we need to, all of that. And then, the STD testing is for men and women. And a lot of the population that's coming in for STD testing is also at risk for a potential future pregnancy. So we have that. And then we do a lot of prevention. So we're in schools and we talk about, your sexual health and sexual relational health, the media. And then we offer those services to anyone in the school that needs to be tested. The other thing that I haven't talked about is we have marriage and family therapy. So we have therapists that are there to walk through these relationship, I mean, if somebody chooses to parent and then they're in a relationship, how do you co-parent? How do you do? So we have therapy for that. We have therapy for teenagers who are struggling and just want to talk to somebody, or the single mom, so there's a lot of that. So it's looking at the physical, the emotional, the mental health component, and then the spiritual. We also do, support groups for post-abortion, but also miscarriage. We work with an organization that does miscarriage support, for adoption, for women who place, just like it was so powerful for me to be in a room with other women who'd had abortions, it's the same for women who've chosen adoption. To be in a room and in relationship with other birth moms is really powerful and necessary. So that's some of it.
Yeah, that's a pretty big menu. I mean,
Yeah.
you think about it, that's amazing. So I know you never thought you'd still be here, but if you had a way to kind of summarize, looking back and talking to yourself when you were 19 again, from where you are now, how would you encourage your 19-year-old self to get through that journey?
Oh man. I was talking to someone the other day about my hero in my life, who was my grandfather, and and what was it about him? And in so many ways, was so opposite of me. Like, he noticed the hummingbird and the tomato growing in the garden, and just had such an appreciation of. He had such a hard life, but you would never know that. You would just see his faith and his thankfulness. And the thing I said was, he was not shaken by the circumstances or the world around him. And I think if I looked back at my 19-year-old self, I would say, don't be shaken by what is to come. Don't let it shake you to the point where you can't get back up. And so I think that's one thing, because I think there are seasons where it's really hard. I mean, it could be an event. I mean, I overanalyze things. I shouldn't have said that, or what if we had done this, or did that person leave early because they were mad, or did they leave early because their babysitter had, sometimes you get caught in those situations, and just to not let those things shake you, but also to just realize that, um, you're never going to arrive. Like, I'm never going to be the perfect leader. We're constantly, keep improving and keep trying to be better and learn from all your mistakes. And I would love to think that I have done that. I mean, that is one, we've had really tough seasons, and I don't forget them. I remember the tough things we've been through, and I've tried to be a better leader out of it, or I've tried to manage people better through mistakes, constantly learning from mistakes. And I think that, I don't know that at 19 I would have, or 23 would have realized that in my role at Claris. But just as a 19-year-old and just going through that abortion, I also don't think I would have ever known. I mean, I think I would have said to that girl, like, you don't know. I mean, I think of just the Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, just the powerful words that Jesus said. I think I needed to hear that at 19, for not what you, because I thought I knew what I was doing, but deep down, you still don't really know what you're doing. You're trying to make a decision in isolation and alone, and out of fear and out of shame and out of guilt. And then the forgiveness comes in too, of if somebody had sat me down at 19 and had said, what is it that you actually want to do? If I could, and I've said this is part of my counseling technique, if I could silence all the voices in your head, what do you want to do? I would have said, I want to have a baby. And I think that's where a lot of the shame came in for me, is because I went against everything I actually wanted. And if somebody would say, well, why are you so terrified? Well, my dad's going to kill me, or whatever. Well, can I help you with that? What if I go with you? I think that there is so much power in that. And as a 19-year-old kid, you just don't know that. You think you're so much older. And so to give yourself grace, to not be shaken by the world, and then to just know you're going to keep making mistakes, and just learn from them, and in humility, just keep moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably difficult for you to do, I'm going to guess, but not entirely, I'm sure. But I mean, look at where you are, right? It didn't define you. I'm not saying that the journey was fun or, especially early on necessarily, right? But to have accomplished what you've accomplished, to have been part of leading, and I know it's not just you, there's a board, you got, a whole team, but to be the leader of an organization that has done what Claris does and have kept that not just on track and open, right? Which is an accomplishment in and of itself, because running a charitable organization is brutal. But to continue to grow it and move it forward and meet new needs, and I mean that's phenomenal. Frankly, it's phenomenal. And I'm sure your 19 and 23-year-old self would have at that time questioned if you were capable or if you were still defined by what you were seeing as a failure or a mistake, right? And I think this message in general, regardless of who's listening and what they might have in their past, that's something that's their scar that they think somehow defines them. It truly doesn't, and you're such an awesome example of that. And I don't know, I'm sure you probably understand that as well at this point in your life, right? But I'm not going to make you brag on yourself, but I'll do it for you. You've shown incredible resolve, incredible, like you said, humility, and just that servant heart to keep just moving forward and knowing that it's not always going to be pretty or a straight line to success. And like you said, you'll also never arrive, but just that's not the point. I think the script we're given of, you've got to accomplish and reach this point or this apex, to feel like you finally made it is a bunch of garbage. That's just my opinion, but I don't think there is a top of the mountain. I think we just keep going, right? But wow, what do you see the next 5 years of Claris looking like?
Oh man. I'm so blessed in so many ways that I'm surrounded by a team that has an even bigger vision than I do. And I think one of the things that I love is that, collectively, I think we've built this sort of comprehensive model. And as the needs are growing, Claris is growing. But I think what I would love to see is this replicated in other parts of the country, because I don't think, they say like, as California goes, so goes the nation or whatever, and what, when I was in Oklahoma, I think years ago, I could have been like, well, it's the Bible Belt. But now I talk to friends in Oklahoma and I think, oh, they need the Claris model as much as we need it because things are changing. One little example for you, and a staff member came to me recently and said, we teach court mandated parenting classes. And so anyone who's like lost their child, we're able to sort of help with reunification. And then we were asked to go into this women's prison and teach. And so I show up at a meeting and my staff is like, so, we just want to tell you, so we sort of created a family reunification program. So when you hear that in the meeting, don't be surprised, act like you knew what we were talking about. And I was like, wait, what? Like, oh yeah. So we named all these things that we're doing, our family reunification program. And there was such this sweet moment in me of being so proud that I have this team that feels equipped enough to say, this is what we're doing. We're helping reunify families. We're not just preserving, we're reunifying. And we're doing all these things. And I think if I look at the next 5 years to move into a season of seeing others adopt the model, and Claris doesn't need the credit, but that people would, wherever they are, that they would see, we should be looking at the before, during, and after of all of these situations. And imagine how much our communities would change if we just said, look, we're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to laugh with you in joyful seasons, to celebrate with you, to cry with you, to heal with you, to grieve with you. Like, what a difference that would make. So, I mean, I don't know. It could mean that we help launch other Clarises. It could mean that we just say, here's a blue book. read the white paper I wrote. I wrote a white paper on the model and love to share that. And why don't you, think about in your community what you could do? Because I just think that it's about giving people hope. And I think we're coming out of a season. I mean, I'm so adamant that isolation is not good for anyone. And being alone, and we don't know what's going on behind these closed doors. And I don't know what's going to happen when we fully open up again and we realize how the devastating impact in the hearts and the lives of those in our community. And we need to be prepared to move toward people. And we need to start moving toward people now in whatever way we can. And so I think I wanted to see more of that. I think also a lot of government organizations or those dependent on government funding are going to potentially lose a lot of funding. And so it's time for others to step up and say, where can we fill in the gap? How can we help rebuild the lives in our cities?
Yeah.
Hurting.
So you have a white paper?
I do.
That's awesome. We will definitely, we'll link that and or upload it, whatever we need to do. I definitely want to make sure that's available. You speak to a very common thread that a number of our guests have spoken to relative to just getting up and filling gaps, right? And getting up and finding out where we can plug in, whether that's with an existing organization, whether that's coming alongside and teaming with Claris, whether that's, like you said, seeing that model, seeing that need in another location and reaching out and say, hey, I think we need that here. Is there a way for us to become equipped or knowledgeable enough to do that? I never thought that this would necessarily be a common thread that I've heard literally every interview, but that's really cool to hear again that that concept that is universally appropriate regardless of the topic or theme or need, and how profoundly impactful that action is to filling those gaps, right? And not necessarily needing to know how or have all the answers answered before we start, just deciding, hey, I am here for something bigger than just me. Running my life, pursuing my goals is perfectly acceptable and welcome, obviously, but what if we add a little bit of effort and energy to what can we do in addition? It almost blows my mind when I meet people who, I understand we're busy and everything, right? But when I meet people who literally aren't involved in anything, and that's not an insult, and maybe I'm, just surrounded by a lot of people who are overly involved perhaps, but it's almost foreign to me. Like, it would be amazing to conceptualize this idea of what if nobody was sitting on their duff, right? What if everybody was actively involved in pursuing something that they're passionate about and helping the world? I can only imagine how far that would go. Is there a person still today who, you mentioned your grandfather, right? Who modeled or models and or keeps you on fire to keep moving forward?
Yes, there are, there's quite a few. I mean, I think I'm in a couple of CEO groups where there's some others who are either in the same industry or in another industry that, is similar, where we're able to encourage each other. So on those days, if it feels lonely or feels like I'm the only one dealing with something, I have somebody on speed dial that can help. And I think that's been really helpful. And I've seen leaders come and I've seen leaders go, and I've watched, some in great ways and some in tragic ways. And I think it's just encouraging to have that community of people to just say, look, this isn't hard. Working in, like you said, a charitable organization, it can be emotional. We deal with really hard life situations. And so having people in this industry, but then also out, so that I can step away sometimes and be like, I just want to go to dinner and not think about work, or, have friends that I can just hang out with. And so I think there is just that community. It's all about community. And I have a great community now that helps with all of that.
That's very good. Um, where can people find you? We'll also put these in our show notes, but where can people find you and or Claris, socials, websites? You want to?
Yeah. So we're on social. So I think I'm Talitha J, and Claris is just at Claris Health, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Our website's just clarishealth.org. And yeah, so the name like Talitha, I'm not that hard to find. There's not that many of us.
No, that's a
So
good thing. Easy to remember. Um, if you have one nugget of wisdom for anybody who might not ever get to hear from you again, that they can hold on to and kind of incorporate into their mindset for life, one nugget of wisdom from Talitha that would bless others if they lived by it. What's your nugget?
you know, I there's this quote that I was telling someone the other day. I thought I read it somewhere, and then they're like, I think you made it up, but so I don't know. This is either from Talitha or it's stolen, so don't sue me if it is. But it says, hope grows in the dark. And I feel like we live in a culture that likes to see the shiny finished product, but forgets that sometimes the most beautiful moments actually start in the dark. And if you think about the people in life, the people who I respect so much, my mentors, most of them have fallen really hard at some point in their life. And that's actually what makes them the most, is seeing where they've been and where they are. And so whatever it is in your life, to just not forget that hope starts, it grows in the dark. And then yes, at some point, hopefully it's on this shiny display, but not disconnected from that little tiny seed of just a seed was planted and it started there. And I think we all have that moment in our life. If you can think like the worst moment of your life, but it was a turning point. Like, where was that little turning point? And don't be afraid to share that, because somebody needs to hear that moment. And I know most people. I have a pastor mentor friend of mine that has imparted so much wisdom, and it was all from all his failures. He had them laminated. These are the things that I struggle with, um, and I think of that every day. Where is my laminated list of failures that I need to overcome? What are the things that I'm predestined to do? And just, whether it's leading from that place or parenting from that place or whatever it is, just remember, especially with kids. I mean, I think my girls don't know my story yet. They're too young, but that will be the hardest conversation I ever have. And yet I pray that through seeing their mom's mistakes, they will know that no matter what they go through in life, that they're not defined by that. I will always love them and hope that they can come to me if they need me. And so that's where.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's a great piece of wisdom. Um, is there anything else that people should know about your journey? I mean, um, maybe I'll ask a little bit about. Do you know about the like founding till your arrival? Do you know what that was like? And that's partly almost my own question for me more than anything, because Be the Church is a young organization, and like you said, 44 years ago it started. 19 later you came in. So what is that? 24 years of 25 years of time
Yeah,
between founding and your arrival, and their budget 25 years later was 90,000. Right? So
I know. And now it's so our budget now is about 1.7 million. So I always tell the person that hired me, I was like, I was an expensive hire. I mean, if you look at it, I'm like a $1.7 million. You know, so the founder was a woman named Loretta, and she just passed away a couple years ago. She lived to be in her late 90s, and she was the sweetest woman. And I had the privilege of interviewing her and chatting with her a couple of times. There've only been 4 directors in 44 years.
wow.
So each director had quite a tenure. And Loretta told me, when they first founded the organization, they thought it was going to be a temporary organization, and they thought it was right around the time that all the abortion laws passed, and they thought, gosh, we need to be a place so women can, ask questions and we can help educate them, but it's probably not going to be needed for very long. And then here we are. And another sort of sweet thing is they had a doctor that was the very first doctor way back in the day. He was with us for 40 years. So he just about 4 years ago retired from Claris, and then he just officially retired from being an OBGYN. So the history is rich but simple. And, looking back, they founded it as a community-based organization because their primary goal was to serve the community and to be a place. And so I love that even though there's been a lot of changes, at the heart, it was giving people information, giving them sort of the time and the space to process, loving them the way that God would want us to love them, and just walking through life with them. And I still know the two directors before me were still in communication frequently. And so it also was just these beautiful handoffs of, it went from Loretta to Susan, and Susan to Christy, and Christy to me. And so it's great. And each person sort of had a different sort of calling in what it was that they were supposed to do. And when they hired me, they had said, we really know we need to become a licensed medical clinic, which means we need to move. So they gave me sort of marching orders. And then, we just sort of grew from there. So yeah, I mean, it's been really big steps. I mean, it went, I think, from becoming a clinic, added quite a few zeros to the budget, and then another office, and then another office, and then all these programs. But we still, I mean, even at 1.7 million, I mean, other organizations that do, similar things have much higher budgets in Los Angeles. So we're still considered somewhat small for what we do.
Yeah.
But
No,
definitely.
but that's a tremendous journey, though. Wow. That's really beautiful. Well, I definitely thank you for your time. And again, I have a whole lot more questions that I'll just reserve for another time where we can fit into your busy schedule. But I'm fortunate to know and have been exposed to you a long time ago, and to have gotten to see Claris Health on that journey as well. So I appreciate your time so much, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll be able to get you back on and dive a little bit more deeply into some of the branches of the conversation that we didn't have a chance to get into today. But thank you for being such an amazing example for people who you serve. One, right? Your daughters are going to, man, talk about just an amazing resource that they're going to have as they go through the transition into young adulthood and into adulthood. And just, I know the circle of friends that you keep are blessed by you as well. And hopefully our listeners are getting a taste and flavor of that. But I love the fact that you've just allowed the journey to unfold before you, and trust in your faith, and see it create such a beautiful story along the way. And I have no doubt it'll continue to be amazing for sure. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
Chat again soon, hopefully.
Absolutely.